This is Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell on the Forge Audio Network.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Forge Daily. I'm your host, Mackenzie Barwell, coming to you on May 8th, 2024. Yesterday, as you probably know, Forge FC took on CF Montreal for the quarterfinal of the Canadian Championship and that school day match. So, of course, to debrief it, I am joined by Steve Milton for today's episode. He and I recorded this right after the match yesterday. So before we get into that, I want to provide a couple more contextual pieces about the Canadian Championship. Pacific and Atletico will play tonight at 7 p.m. for their quarterfinal round. Another CPL side, Cavalry FC, they faced off against the Vancouver Whitecaps last night and would concede 2-1. So a little more to make up for in their second leg. And then League One side, St. Laurent will face off against TFC for their end of the quarterfinal after defeating CPL side, the Halifax Wanderers, in the preliminary round. So all very exciting. I believe they also play tonight. So maybe keep an eye out for those matches if you want to see some potential future opponents for Forge FC. That's all for now. Just thought it would be good to keep in mind. Let's get right into my conversation with Steve Milton, because as always, he and I had a lot to talk about. I am alongside my good friend Steve Milton to review this morning's matchup against CF Montreal for the quarterfinal of the Canadian Championship. What a game it was. 14,000 students, a sunny day. I think I tanned, actually, Milty.
Well, I wouldn't doubt it. The players were saying, Mac, that it wasn't the heat so much, but the brightness of the sun.
Yeah.
Because it was directly overhead, the time of year change, and it was really, they said that's the part they found the hardest.
It's so
was
true.
That.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I underestimated the power of the sun because it wasn't that hot out, realistically.
No, it wasn't that at all, but it was perfect conditions for a game, and the wind didn't play that much of a factor into the game, which was wonderful. Yeah. And of course, the atmosphere was just astounding.
Phenomenal.
Just astounding.
Right out of the gate.
Right. Well, it's funny because we were sitting up here and I'm still in the press box looking across. And at one point I looked up and every street that you can see, and you can see about 3/4 of the street that surround Tim Hortons Field had buses on it. Like it was nuts.
Oh, that's unreal.
What they did, I think 5 waves of buses. Yeah, it was so well timed. It was like a military machine the way they moved them in and out. But some of the kids got here. When you're doing 5 waves, some kids have to get here an hour before the game time, or they're not going to get 5 waves in here.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And so you can imagine what they're like. First of all, they're sitting in the sun. Second of all, they're kids. My guess is that they're going to want to do it again next year. The people 100%. That came, they say, please do it again. Now, I don't know, that's an awful lot of stuff to organize, but maybe they have a template now that they can do. I haven't really talked to the organizers yet, and it took 2 years to put this together. As you can read a pretty detailed story of that on the Forge website on how long it took to put together all those things. But now there's a template, and they may want to do it again. And I know the kids will want it.
Oh,
that's for
my
sure.
gosh.
I know.
So many screaming kids. I was hosting the match, and it was nothing like I had ever done before because typically, as an in-game host, I am the one to energize the crowd, and the crowd doesn't necessarily energize me.
I was just going to say that. It was almost in reverse. Yeah.
So it's so true. It was fantastic. And just an unreal, it's one thing to have that many students come out, but it's another to have every single one buy in and really, cheer for a side and be involved in the game. And I don't know, show so much encouragement.
Well, yeah, it had an effect on the players. And I think it was David Chouanière after the game was saying that, where it really affected them at first, because once the game starts, you're so focused on the here and now, and the 5 yards in front of you, that kind of thing. But he said it was in warm up, because normally in warm up, even if there's a good crowd of, let's say, 6,000 here for a CPL game, they're not there for the warm up.
No,
there might be a couple. Maybe a few hundred in there for the warm up. But this one, they were, and they were all looking around. They waved their arms to them. I mean, people were I was walking around the field, and then all of a sudden you came up on the board, and all of a sudden everybody in the stands is watching you on the board and going crazy, like it was.
Well, we did the "Who Are We" Forge FC chant during the warm up, and I was genuinely shell shocked at how loud it was because the stadium wasn't even full at that point. We didn't have everyone who was supposed to come yet. And to Dav's point, I was the same, like, kind of struck by the entire thing once I walked out onto the field. Even, 20 minutes before the game started, to see that upper bowl also open, crazy.
And you could tell that they'd studied this in school and had those kinds of things. Everything that was advertised, that's the way it turned out.
Oh, 100%.
The people were prepared for the game. They knew the players. A lot of the players were. And, of course, when Juanier scored the goal, it was as loud as you could ever see.
You couldn't write it any better. Of course it's going to be Dav Juanier.
And some of the game he was playing against his brother when they got a little more midfield. Now down the other end, he was eating up their one defensive back. I think who was it? I just got to look up his name at the moment here.
That's
it was Iliadis.
Okay.
And really, the two of them outside were just eating him up. And depending on who was outside. They had to make changes at halftime. Montreal did, and I think that crowd got the Forge going right away. I mean, they had a shot, they had a chance in the first few seconds, of the game. They had a chance, and maybe there was a foul there, maybe there wasn't. But and then to score, and really they maybe could have had more if they could have put just better shots on the net, which is they're going to have to do more and more as this season goes on. They're going to have to hit that net more because they're creating chances, because you can't stop them forever. Not even an MLS side. Here's something, Mac. At home, they played. That was their third game at home against an MLS side. Mm-hmm. Not one of them has beaten them in 90 minutes. In the 90 minutes regulation.
That's interesting. So it's always either been
they
penalties
lost 2 shootouts
or overtime.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a game like today where it didn't go. It didn't get extended because it is a 2. People should understand, and I hope most people do, that this is a 2-game set, and it's most goals to count. And if there's a tie, there's an away goal, which is why that second goal at 1-1 early in the second half really was big for Montreal. That's why they changed their lineup, because they were sluggish. They were getting beaten to the ball, and so they brought in 4 players they hadn't planned to use. The coach, very definite about that, Laurent Courtois, after the game, saying this was not our plan. The plan was not to bring those players in. 4 of them, all 4 of them played 90 minutes against Nashville the other night. So, and they've got 3 big games coming up, huge games coming up, and in the MLS. And so they really wanted to save those players, but they couldn't afford to. They couldn't afford to go down 2-0 going home. That's awful difficult to do.
Interesting.
And they needed to get that away goal, and away goals make a huge difference. So that was a bit heartbreaking for the Forge. That said, Montreal deserved that goal with the way they pressed at the start of the second half.
Right. And I knew they made 4 substitutions, but I didn't realize it would have been their starters who played this past weekend and will likely start again.
Especially the guy who got the goal.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 of them.
6 minutes
Raheem
in.
Edwards,
to the second half. I think it was Duke. Is his name?
Right. Yeah, Bryce Duke, and he's small. Bryce Duke is very small, and but he can run 1,000 miles a minute. And so they had 4 fresh legs in, and there were some questions from some of the media afterwards that they maybe considered that some kind of fault on the substitution pattern of Forge, but Forge doesn't operate that way.
No.
And you don't operate that way, especially if you're winning 1-0 and you're having some kind of success, because then you're allowing the other team to dictate. Right. And even though everybody ranks Montreal higher, and of course they have an $8 million payroll, and Forge is a $1.2 million payroll. And of course they're going to have some players there that can dominate. But in a game like this, and Forge is setting the pace, I don't think you decide we're going to change our tactics because they changed their people. You don't do that. But it did show that they had some fresher legs at the moment, because you've got 8 legs new in there, right, and to none for Forge. And when Forge made their substitutions at about late late 70s or early, I think it was 81st minute, then they dominated
Right.
and could have won this game because of the fresh legs they had.
I was just going to say, take a look at what Noah Jensen did right off the hop once he runs onto the field. Now, I do want to get to that, Milty, but let's circle back because I kind of want to go through the match and some key events that unfolded. As you said earlier, so cool to see how well a lot of these students knew. I'm sure, as you said, too, they did their research. I asked a couple of them who their favorite players were. And sometimes when I ask that question, that people tend to freeze and they could either say, I don't know, I can't decide. There's so many great players, but I got definite names every single time.
Oh, did you? Who did they mention?
Some fan favorites were
like nobody said Messi or anything like that, right?
Imagine.
Right, so,
but typically, with kids, you never know. I got Noah Jensen, Tristan Borges, Kyle Becker.
Really?
Classics. Noah was a big name. So,
well, he's coming off, of course, a goal, a very critical goal.
Yeah. But looking at that opening kickoff, FC really coming out with some fire, charging right into the opposing 18-yard box, and I think it was Jordan Hamilton goes down about 30 seconds in, and a controversial
could have been a penalty.
Call. That's what I mean.
Could have been a penalty. Yeah.
I was standing right next to the Forge bench, and Coach Bobby not happy with the lack of call there. But did you see what unfolded, and what was your perspective on that?
I couldn't really, I sort of just lifted my head at the second because I wasn't expecting it so early, and I was doing a couple of other things and writing things.
Yeah, well, I think you and the ref.
What happened
You
there?
and the ref.
Yeah, and the ref. Well, I think that's what happened. And I also don't think you want to call that right away. But that gave him a problem. I mean, look at how many, what was there, 4 yellow cards on Montreal's part? Yeah, 4 yellows for Montreal, and well deserved, I thought. It could have been more. I mean, I thought Choinière was getting held an awful lot. Like, I thought there was a lot of grabs on Choinière and on Borges.
Very aggressive, yeah.
Yeah, very aggressive. But that's MLS style, and I actually like that. And that's one of the things that's very attractive about MLS. They let a lot of stuff go. And it's the only way to sell North America to North American non-soccer fans, and it's the Canadian Premier League is a lot like that too. They sort of want. I mean, diving in both places is really frowned upon, and so you don't see some of the dramatics that you normally would in soccer in most other continents. So I like that, but it can put you into, and I think we saw the same thing against York.
Oh yeah,
where you don't make that call early, and then what is and what isn't, and then they decide to get a little bit tough, and all of a sudden all of a sudden the yellow cards are flying like confetti.
And the lines are blurred then because you don't really set that bar at the first opportunity that you have, and obviously the refs were in a very tough position having that happen so quickly. I think it could have been, it was a lose-lose situation. It was going to be controversial regardless.
But in the long run, it produced a pretty good game.
Totally.
I thought that physicality of it was part of the attraction of this game.
Yeah.
In my mind. There's some wonderful plays out there.
Yeah, and my plan was to go up to 7, but right when the first whistle blew, so much started happening, and I was almost just frozen in place because of that physicality. Like you said, I was like, holy crap, we're really going. This is an MLS opponent, and it's not unnoticeable.
No, that's true. And there was danger on every part of the field going each way. And I had the same issue because I was trying to, let this kind of thing out of the bag, but I was trying to also concentrate on some other stuff I was writing for the Hamilton Sports Group. And I would normally do that when the ball would look like it was out of trouble and you might put your eyes down for a couple of minutes. But it never was. But it never was. It was, it always seemed to be like there was some kind of pressure somewhere. And part of it, one of the Forge worked the outside extremely well. They're so talented on the outside there. And then when you've got Benny kind of working through the middle, and I don't think we can understate what Jordan Hamilton did. I don't think he's been happy not starting, given the kind of career that he's had. But this is a man who's won 3 Canadian championships.
And a golden boot in the tournament.
And then he plays last week, his first start, and instead of Terran Campbell. Terran gets hurt this week. But I still think Jordan would have played in this one because of, I'm not saying Terran wouldn't have, but I think Jordan probably would have started, given, he's coming off 2 goals.
Right.
He's got that national championship experience.
Totally.
And I mean, this is a high caliber team too. And Taryn, hasn't hit the net yet, or hasn't scored yet. And when you're hot, I think you got to go with the hand. We're seeing that in goal.
Yeah, and if Taryn is maybe dealing with a bit of a knock and you have the option to play a player with such momentum and experience in this specific tournament, I can't see the coaching staff turning that opportunity down. And you look at Jordan's role in that first goal from Dav Chouanier in the 30th minute. He was crucial in the build-up. He dribbled the ball right from half, almost halfway to the goal, passes it to Benny on the outside, as you were just saying. Benny cuts it back. It looks almost as though Jordan dummies it, or maybe accidentally, but it worked perfectly.
No, I think he did dummy it, because I think what he was doing was he was pulling that defender
right
up to him and away from him. He charged the defender. I think he was going to dummy that all the way.
Well,
he knew exactly where Chouanier was, and of course, and Benny finds him perfectly. And Benny is getting better. He's really starting to feel his Cheerios a little bit. Sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much. But, you pay for that. I mean,
that's the kind of player he is.
That's right. That's the price of that kind of player. And you'll take that every time, because 9 out of 10 times he'll make it work. And he actually limited his heel passes today, his back heels, right? He only had a couple today.
Yes. I was actually paying attention to that for you, Milty. And at one point I did see him take a touch. The ball was coming from like 30 feet in the air, and he got it. Okay, wait, let me show you. All right. He got it with his heel.
Yeah, I know. He loves his heels.
He it down. I don't know. Anyways, for those of you on audio,
he's better with his
heels.
He's better on his heels than I am with my hands. He's just, which isn't saying much.
Oh, geez, Milty. Well, he passes it back. Jordan dummies it. And then I also got to give Dav his flowers for not only finishing, but showing that kind of composure, because he knew he had time. So he took a touch. And I think, a player in that position could have easily just hammered it one time with that kind of pressure and that kind of pace toward the net. But he took a touch, buries it, top bins.
It was really an outstanding shot. And he's having a marvelous year. There are so many guys right now. Now they're going to come onto a little heavier part of their schedule right now. I mean, they're going this weekend to Pacific, and that's a team you want to take care of. They haven't actually lost yet. I mean, Hamilton's ahead of them right now, but as much momentum as you can build up, that's what you want to do. And I can't imagine that this kind of result hurts their confidence. It's going to help them. They're not happy that they ended up tied 1-1, because you've now given up an away goal. And you could have maybe scored another one in the first half there.
Totally.
But they also got reminded about what they have to do a little bit there. There were maybe too many intercepted passes, some of which came from, my feeling was, playing against teams that you have time to do the kinds of things, which gets me back to Chouanier, that he recognized that he had a little time, even against a good team that moves well. That's the difference between, say, an MLS caliber team and a Liga Mex type of team, compared to even good teams in the CPL. You have a little more time to especially move on the defense, but their defenders closed so rapidly. That's how they got their goal.
Exactly.
There was a long looping pass that was
to Chouanier, right?
Yeah, that was kind of, frankly, a little lazy because it was just too much from where it was, and it was intercepted, and out they go, and then they end up. They had a bad bounce for Hamilton, because the first shot was blocked by a defender. It was beautifully blocked, but it went right back to the guy who'd taken the shot, and in the net. You don't give him two chances. You can't, So I don't know what you could have done. I mean, blocked the shot. It was tremendous, and most of the way, particularly in the first half, I thought when Montreal got chances, there was a lot of great blocks in the back group. They really got in the way of balls. I mean, and then Kalongo made a couple of tremendous saves during the game, probably 2 or 3 game savers during the game that maybe get lost because we think of the last chance, which was Noah Jensen's chance, where their goalkeeper makes
unreal.
And what David Chouanier, who knows Breza, who's the goaltender, he said if he's not 6'4", he does not get that ball, and they win the game 2-1. Mm-hmm. If he's even 2 inches shorter, he does not get that ball.
Well, he just barely touched it.
And then Kalongo, of course, had made a couple of brilliant ones, and I'm not even sure there was no VAR, so probably but the first shot it was really close to being inside, but he punched it up. He made a great save, like tremendous reaction save, punched it up, and then punched the rebound
Again,
to
over
get
the
it
crossbar. That's our favorite save. It seems to be a recurring theme for us.
Well, it is, and he's got tremendous leaping ability, and he's very athletic, and he had no chance on the goal because obviously you don't give a shooter that plays in the MLS a second chance.
Well, no, smart of him to just push it out of traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it I don't know. I thought they had a lot to be proud of on those things. But they're going to have to move the ball. Montreal took away the middle quite a bit. You saw them really gang up on Kyle a little bit, but I thought Kyle played with great composure.
As he does,
played the whole game. Yeah, I mean, he had to go the whole 90 because they wanted to put this. They put Noah, didn't substitute him for Kyle, which they did last game and often do if they're
yes, they took out Borges.
Yeah, and put him up on that side because because Borges had run 25 miles.
Oh geez.
It was because they're playing that lane game and because they wanted to use the width of the stadium. And particularly because they played a pretty good possession game, but they were really outpossessed, and that is not a familiar position for them to be in. And I think it was 56-44 or something like that.
Yeah,
something like that.
Not so noticeable, I would say, in the first 20 minutes of the first half.
No.
I want to go back to that first goal for Montreal because, as you said, Forge conceding in a position where Montreal forces a turnover, potentially a lazy pass, and then they're able to capitalize on that. Do you think that this was a matter of Forge coming out not necessarily flat-footed, but not with the same sense of urgency that we saw initially in the first half?
It's hard to, I think so. I think a little bit, and they weren't on the front foot. That is for sure, and I think that surprised Bobby a little bit. And that wasn't fatigue. I mean, they just had a rest, so it wasn't like the fresh legs. Were necessarily playing a lot on. I mean, they were tired. I mean, you play a full half hard against a team like that, you're going and you have that kind of up and down game. That there could have been some of that there. I really don't know. I think
there's almost just a lapse in, like a moment of weakness or a lapse in judgment, because I didn't feel like that was necessarily consistent.
No.
It was just a moment. It
was just a moment, and I don't want to call that I used the word lazy, and that isn't what it was. I think it was just ill-advised to try and go across field that deep at that point, especially with them having fresh legs on there. And the fresh legs energized that team, and it isn't just the fatigue level. What it was for Montreal, because they were tired. They played on Saturday night. Right. And Montreal's having, they're getting used to turf here. The turf here is different than they would normally play on, and the ball bounces differently, all of those kinds of things. I would say this about Forge, though. One of the things, what do you think here? They gave up too many corners. Now, part of that was because they made some great saves and some great blocks, but that means the other team is in position to make you make those plays, and so the ball goes over the end line, the touch line, and I think they had 8 of them.
I'm just looking at the stat now.
Forge had 6, right?
Forge 6. Oh, you beat me to it. I feel like we need a buzzer.
Sorry.
Forge had 6, right?
I know. That's 14 corners.
That's a lot.
Something's going to happen for either team on that, and particularly when you look at probably the skill. I mean, I think their coach was not surprised, but he was very complimentary of the skill level of Forge. I think that caught them a little bit by surprise at how. I mean, you don't know till you get out there against these people, and then all of a sudden, Perez doing some moves on you, and all of a sudden, I mean, Chouanier and Borges are on top of their game, and they don't really know much about Badabanga, and those kinds of guys. So
I just think that, this is one of the things that Coach Bobby mentioned to me in our episode this past week was, in previous, obviously they haven't been successful in terms of winning against Montreal, but Montreal hasn't seen them, I think, at peak efficiency, if you will. Like,
No.
even when referencing the partnership with Dav and Borges, he said from a multitude of reasons they weren't always at their best form at the same time last year.
At the same time, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, even Benny wasn't around at that point. So I just think that even though, and this was also something that Coach Bobby said, even though that there are a few returning players and newer ones like Benny and Para, the group still seems refreshed, because of the health and form on so many levels.
Well, and you say something like, you can say that they're a different club and that they're stronger in many ways than they were when they faced them before because of those. I mean, those two guys were playing on one leg each last year.
Right, exactly.
Basically, and then that neither of them had a healthy year last year physically, and now they both feel healthy, and they're thankful for their healthiness. Like that, live every day like it's your last one. Once you've had those types of injuries, you play like thankful for being alive again. That's
so
alive.
True.
Those kinds of things. That's part of it. But think of what they're also missing. Malik wasn't there in the middle, and Malik was, having one of those breakthrough years where, third, you're kind of looking at the hinge year where this is the year that he breaks out, and then,
that TSN turning point.
That's
situation.
Right, turning point in your life. And two guys that they got specifically for non-league games. I mean, they were going to play league games too, but had they, obviously they would have wanted them for champions play and international play and also for Canadian championships, the deeper they go against higher level teams. And that's Nana Opoku and Eleman Cisse. I think Cisse would have made a difference on just for the extra substitution patterns and those kinds of things. And they've been held up. With I guess I don't know if it's immigration.
I think it's
what it is.
Visas. They're figuring out their work visas and logistical things. But that's a great point, Milty.
And so there's 3 players right there who
add to the rotation, let alone depth.
Rotation. Yeah. I mean, that tells you, I think, how deep this team is right now. And part of that is because players that were brought along to develop have been. Kone. He didn't get. I would have liked to see him out there to sprint today.
Oh man, we enjoy watching him off the bench.
I know, but I mean, Kwasi is basically can help.
Kwasi too, yeah,
Kwasi can do that too. So they got some speed there, and they got some elements to the game. There's a bunch of different pieces that. And I hate to, no, pieces is the wrong word. I hate it makes people sound like commodities. But they've got different types of styles that fit together. That players can replace players, bring a little something different, but also the similar styles. So they usually have the same type of players that can come, and they could be all, and most of them are flexible. But they also have some players that add stuff that you don't.
Little flair.
Yeah. A little flair,
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what makes them, I know it sounds like we're homers, but they're having a darn good season so far. I mean, it's early, but so far it's really, really encouraging and very entertaining.
Yes.
That's one thing Bobby said. I don't know if he said that to you afterwards or not, but he talked a lot about that. People said, how did you like to have that? How was it like to have that many kids here? And he said, what I heard was that many fans here. Right? It's just, and he's the best coaches in this league also care about the product in this league. And then we're talking obviously about Cavalry and Hamilton. They're the 2 coaches, and there's a couple of others that really, really care about the development of the style of play in the league as well. Like, let's entertain people. And because that's what puts people in the stands. And when people are in the stands, especially casual fans, like you hear this, you say it was a 1-1 game, you think, oh, there couldn't have been much offense. You go, what? Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Did you see there was offense in this game,
Well, that's so true. And I do think that Coach Bobby is very intentional about the way that he refers to fans as just kind of one thing. He often reinforces that when asked about opposing fans. He thinks like the more people, the better, whether they're kids, whether they're older, whether they're opposing team members.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And Milty,
quickly, I want to make sure that everybody knows what has to happen for this second leg, because you mentioned it before, because Forge concede an away goal to Montreal, that'll weigh in on how this next game unfolds. So, or the result, or the impact of the result.
Right. So here's how it works. If the two teams are tied on aggregate, for those of you without a dictionary, that means total. The first thing is that if the aggregate is tied, then away goals will decide. So if
Right.
Montreal, if the score is 0-0, Montreal advances. There's no shootout, anything like that, even though the aggregate score will be only 1-1 because they'll have one. So Hamilton has to score at least one goal. That's how it has to be. And if they win 1-0, they will win because they'll be up 2 games. If it's 1-1, then we will go into shootout.
Penalties, right.
Right,
Okay.
penalties. If it's 2-1 for Hamilton, it does not go to penalties because, well, they'll have won the game. They'll have won on aggregate. If it's 2-2,
they will win.
They will win because they'll have two away goals. So the idea is to get 2 goals.
So
because they'll have to score 3.
Just to recap, yes, I totally see what you're saying. They either have to win this next game or tie with more than 1 goal.
With more than 1 goal, exactly.
Or hypothetically 1-1, then they win PKs, then they advance.
And then they can win that way, yeah.
Okay, Milty, I am genuinely so excited for this next game, and as much as I was a little hesitant about the away goal rule, it means that there has to be some offensive action for Forge FC in this next round. So I look forward to talking about that one with you, but our next episode, I believe, will be Forge FC and Pacific.
On Saturday at Pacific, right?
That is right. So Forge will head to Victoria to play away against Pacific. As you said, they have yet to lose a game this season, so that'll be interesting.
And
but 5 p.m. on Saturday. But quickly, Milty, just in transition here, you mentioned they're a tough opponent. What are you seeing from them, and what have you seen from them in the past?
They are tough. And, they've again, they haven't lost, and they're expected to be, somewhere in there in the mix, but there's still, I think, mid-range. But I think just playing at home, and this Forge has a target on their backs. They have had for a long time, and they
always do.
They kind of like it. Actually, they don't mind having to go into Montreal and having to. I mean, they've done this before. I think they've done a dozen away type things. So going to Pacific, they can win on the road. They were an excellent road team last year and have been much of their, particularly in the second half, although we're in the first half right now. And I think Pacific will give them trouble. But again, the confidence that has come on this team of scoring in a game that, maybe they didn't play very well in the first half against York, but it was an important game. And when it needed, they got the 90th minute goal, and then almost did it again today. So I think they've got enough underneath them here that they can, and I think that's even what didn't bother them about in the game today. So many chances, so much front foot play from the visitors in the first 10, 15 minutes of the second half today. They didn't wilt under that because their thing is, we are going to face some point in there a sustained, soccer's that way. It's like basketball. There's going to be a sustained period when you just can't get it going. You just got to weather that and have confidence that if even a bad result comes out of it, like it did with a goal, don't make it 2. I mean, they're talented enough to beat them. I mean, Pacific still is not as good as Forge.
But they've always been kind of a thorn in their side and shown how much they can compete. So it's not, this game by no means is a write-off, and I think it'll be just as exciting to debrief. So
right. They're not among the top 3 right now. I think those are clearly cavalry. I mean, the numbers are showing that on the standings, but I think if you look at the play, they may be. I mean, would you put them 4th? Where would you put them right now? Because I think Atletico is right there.
Ottawa? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know, Ottawa pretty dominant coming off like a record-breaking win in the Canadian Championship. I
That's
think
right.
for now to show that kind of authority, I'll give it to Atletico, but Pacific, man, they've been a consistent force.
And they play a style. And that park is designed for them, or they're designed for the park. It's more like they're designed for the park, right? So
totally.
such a history of good soccer on the West Coast, and not long before we had it here. We've always had great soccer in and around here, but they've had the 12-month advantage, right? Where they can basically kids can play outdoors for 10, 11, 12 months a year, and that over time that shows.
It makes a difference.
It does, and the local stock and the pride too. Like Vancouver now has a team.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should say Victoria now has a team, and that's
right.
That's
well, Vancouver also has a team.
Vancouver also has a team. That's right. So it's very important for those places in terms of civic pride.
I don't want to say. I want to save most of the conversation for after, because I feel like we could go for hours realistically.
On them, sure. Yeah. And actually, I haven't to tell you the truth, I haven't studied Pacific that much yet.
Okay.
So
we'll wait till we get our research in then.
Well, we get our research in also once we go second time around the league. Then we'll have a nice feel for what's what.
Let's get started. All right. Thank you so much again for your time, Milty. And
okay, Mac.
We'll reconvene after this weekend.
Reconvene. All right.
On that note, I will wrap up today's episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Do the same tomorrow on the audio network, because I am joined by head coach and sporting director, Coach Bobby Smirniotis, for season 2, episode 2 of Behind the Beard. And don't forget, this Saturday, tune in to One Soccer and watch your Forge FC face Pacific FC away at Starlight Stadium.
This has been Forge Daily with Mackenzie Barwell. If you like what you heard, please like, follow, subscribe, comment, and share.